For information and ideas questions, your job is to find what the text directly states or strongly implies. Don't bring in outside knowledge or assumptions. The correct answer will be supported by specific lines in the passage, while wrong answers often distort a real detail or include something that is not explicitly stated. A useful strategy here, before looking at the choices, is to paraphrase the relevant actions in your own words. Then you're going to want to test each choice against the text word by word. To solve this question, the second paragraph tells us that the narrator was moved by the family's kindness and that he previously stole their food, and once he realized it hurt them, he then ate berries, nuts, and roots from the woods by himself. Choice B fails because he stopped taking all their food, not just vegetables. Choice C is wrong because the text doesn't show confusion, rather, it shows admiration. And choice D flips the actions. He gathered the wild food for himself, not for the family. On the other hand, choice A matches exactly. He regrets causing them pain and stops taking their food. Therefore, the answer is A. When a passage uses a metaphor or extended analogy, like comparing a job to a race, separate the literal facts from the comparison. The pursuit race is the framing device. The actual facts about Campbell are usually packed into the last few lines. A good move to ask is, what does this person actually do for a living, rather than getting pulled directly into the metaphor? To solve this question, the final sentence is very important. Campbell is paid as long as he stays ahead of the carnival show as an advance man. That tells us his job, an advance man for the carnival. Choice A treats the race literally, but the bicycle race is a metaphor. Choice C says he manages the race, which the text never claims. And choice D adds a debt story. The passage doesn't mention this at all. Choice B is directly stated in the text, however. Therefore, the answer is B. Information and ideas, question 4. Watch the difference between what the passage states and what it suggests beyond the evidence. Trap answers often add a cause, motive, or consequence that sounds reasonable but isn't actually in the text. A reliable way to check this is, for each choice, point to the specific phrase that proved it. If you can't, then eliminate it. To solve this question, the text describes Charles as facing the wilderness with courage and skill, depending on hunting and surviving solitude through self-reliance. That paints him as rugged and self-sufficient. Choice A invents a backstory about education, which is never mentioned. Choice B claims he was lonely. The text says solitude tested his self-reliance, but not that he felt lonely or sought companionship from the indigenous people. Choice D singles out rivers as his primary travel route, but the text mentions forest, other terrain, rivers, and mountains equally. However, choice C is a summary of what's actually shown. Therefore, the best answer is C. Cross-text connections, question 1. Cross-text questions ask you to take the position of one author and apply it to the other text. The key is to identify each author's main claim and conclusion separately, then ask whether they agree, disagree, or extend each other. For how would X respond questions, look for the answer that matches the relationship between the two arguments, not just a true statement about one of them. To solve this question, text 1 presents a theory. Social comparisons on social media lower adolescent self-esteem. Text 2 reports that research finds social media negatively affects adolescent self-esteem through unrealistic images, cyberbullying, and inauthentic online presences. Both texts agree in this regard. Choice B says the theory is not compelling, but text 2's findings actually reinforce it. Choice C says the findings don't support the theory, but the opposite is true. And choice D introduces limited use as a flaw, but text 1 doesn't restrict its scope that way. Choice A captures the entire relationship. Text 2 researchers would see the theory as largely correct and aligned with their own focus. Therefore, the best answer is A. Cross-text connections, question 2. The general strategy is to match items in one text to items in another. List the specific consequences in text 1, then list the specific findings in text 2. If they line up point for point, the answer is usually one that signals agreement or confirmation. Watch for answers that flip the position of the cited researcher. Those are common traps. To solve this question, text 1 lists unintended consequences: curriculum narrowing, test prep emphasis, pressure on disadvantaged schools, and uneven impact on subgroups. Text 2's findings match each one: narrowed curriculum, test prep practices, and disparities for disadvantaged populations. Choice A wrongly says that she concedes NCLB caused gains. Text 2 actually shows that scores were inflated. Choice B has her challenging the causation, which her research doesn't actually do. Choice D has her defending schools, which is the opposite of her findings. And choice C accurately captures that each consequence in text 1 maps to her research. Therefore, the best answer is C. Cross-text connections, question 3. The general strategy is when one text makes a broad claim and the other gives a specific case, the specific case usually works as supporting evidence for the broad claim. You're going to want to identify the broad claim first, then ask whether the second text is an example, a counterexample, or unrelated. To solve this question, text 2 makes the broad claim that producers and artists must adapt to shifting customer preferences and new technologies. Text 1 gives a specific example. iTunes and streaming changed how songs are produced, leading to shorter tracks, which is exactly the kind of adaptation that text 2 describes. Choice A says text 1 digresses, but it's directly relevant. Choice B reframes it as a disclaimer, which doesn't fit. Choice D claims it's misleading, but text 2 doesn't require history. It only begs the reader to invite examples. And choice C captures the relationship. Text 1 substantiates text 2's claim about industry adaptation. Therefore, the best answer is C. Cross-text connections, question 4. The general strategy is to pay attention to how strongly each author phrases their claims. May exist, suggests, and proves are very different. The right answer usually preserves the original certainty level of the cited speaker. For respond questions, eliminate any choice that overstates the cited speaker's position. To solve this question, Madhusudsan in text 2 calls DMS a biosignature for life and points to methane and hydrocarbons as an intriguing cocktail for a life-supporting atmosphere. He's enthusiastic but stops short of claiming proof. Text 1 likewise says that the findings hint at life and need further validation. Choice A contradicts his own research about phytoplankton-produced DMS. Choice B introduces a new recommendation. Central ideas and details. General strategy. Main idea questions ask for the central claim of the entire passage, not a subpoint and not an outside inference. With older texts, paraphrase each sentence into modern English before evaluating answer choices. A good check here. The correct main idea should cover both halves of a two-part argument. Watch for choices that describe only one half. To solve this specific question, this passage has two halves. The first half says that people tend to endure bad governments rather than overthrow them, and shouldn't act for minor reasons. The second half says, when abuse points reach towards tyranny, they have a right and a duty to overthrow the government. Choice A says people can do whatever they had to, which is too broad and it skips the caution against quick action. Choice C is about following ideas, which isn't really the topic. Choice D claims that old governments tend to become evil, but the text doesn't say that. Choice B captures both halves, reluctance to overthrow plus duty under tyranny, so the answer would be B. Question 2. The general strategy here is with detail-dense questions on the 19th century prose, it's best to focus on the last sentence or two, because that's where the central observation tends to land. The earlier sentences usually set up the situation, while the conclusion delivers the point. And you're going to want to watch for choices that misread the tone. Austen uses understated, ironic language, and answers that turn to something literal or physical usually fail. So to solve this question, the passage ends by noting that dancing was a certain step towards falling in love, and that hopes about Mr. Bingley's heart were lively. That tells us the woman's interest piqued at the prospect of a romantic connection. So choice A says they were suspicious of Mr. Bennet's report, but the text says he refused to give one. Choice B claims that they distrust each other, which isn't supported in the text. Choice D adds physical agitation that the passage never describes, and choice C matches the final lines. Their interest spikes around the chance of winning his affection. So the answer would be C. Central Ideas question 3. The general strategy. For notes questions on the digital SAT, you're going to want to focus on the tightly stated goal. The goal here uses two specific words, compare and hazards. The right answers must contain content for both halves of the comparison, early and current, and must focus on hazards, not who did the research. So you're going to want to eliminate any choice that is one-sided, vague, or shifts to a detail that is not regarding hazards. To solve this specific question, the goal is to compare the hazards shown in early versus current evidence. From the notes, early evidence shows that there are fatal effects on livestock, birds, and fish, and current evidence shows that there's cancer risk in descendants. Choice A mentions current cancerous effects but doesn't describe what the early evidence actually showed. Choice B says research continued but doesn't compare hazards at all. Choice D mentions early animal deaths but pivots to who studied the current evidence rather than what hazards it found. Choice C names specific hazards on both sides. Animal deaths early, cancer in humans now. So the answer would be C. Central Ideas Question 4. The general strategy. For main idea questions on philosophical or historical texts, you're going to want to identify the cause and effect chain that the author builds. Pain moves from a starting condition, no government needed, to a triggering change. People fall short morally, to a conclusion. Government becomes necessary. So the main idea should reflect that conditional nature, the when or why government becomes necessary. To solve this question, Paine argues that people initially form society naturally, and while they treat each other justly, government is unnecessary. But because human virtue eventually slips, government becomes necessary to fill that moral gap. Choice A says solitude is preferable, but Paine actually says that people are not suited for solitude. Choice B says government is needed to establish society, but Paine says society forms before government. Choice D says government prevents mutual support, which is the opposite of his point. But choice C captures a conditional logic. Government is only necessary once people fail to act ethically. Therefore, the answer is C.